now give the floor to His Excellency, Mr. Camillo Gonsalves, Chairman of the Delegation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines.
Vous avez la parole.
You have the floor.
Mr. President, St. Vincent and the Grenadines welcomes your ascension to the presidency of this 65th session of the United Nations General Assembly with a great deal of anticipation. As one of the primary architects of your own country's membership in the United Nations, you have demonstrated your belief in the importance of this institution and its role in the modern international context. As you stand on the shoulders of the giants who have preceded you in this role, we are confident that you will ably apply your unique set of skills and experiences to the advancement of our complex agenda. We are also excited by the theme that you proposed for your tenure as the President of the General Assembly, namely reaffirming the central role of the United Nations in global governance. It is a theme that resonates loudly with St. Vincent and the Grenadines, and indeed with many of the small and marginalized states that form a significant part of the 192 members of the General Assembly. We small states have emerged as some of the most jealous and zealous guardians of the United Nations Charter. This vigilance is born of principle and necessity. The Charter is the document that guarantees our place in this assembly as the sovereign equals of every other country of the world. And the United Nations remains the only venue that affords us both a seat and a voice in global affairs. To St. Vincent and the Grenadines, the United Nations must be the center of global governance because it is our only option for global governance. There are some states that fortuitously find themselves in the inner sanctums of the Security Council and the G8 and the G20 and the OECD. For them, the centrality of the UN may vary with the political winds or the shifting sands of great power intrigue. St. Vincent and the Grenadines has no such luxury. We cannot take our ball and go home to play on other fields and interact in other fora. The United Nations is all we have. Its centrality in global government for us is therefore an essential and indisputable truth. Mr. President, commitment fatigue morphs into anger when considered in the context of the Haitian people in the wake of the indescribably devastating January 12th earthquakes. In March of this year, the UN held an inspiring donors conference in which over $10 billion was pledged for Haiti's recovery from the earthquake. Today, 6 months after that conference and 8 months beyond the earthquake, a pathetically minuscule percentage of those pledges has actually been delivered. While less than 20,000 temporary shelters have been built to date, over 1.5 million Haitians are still living in tents. A few days ago, we learned that women and children living in tent cities were killed when heavy rains and winds struck Haiti. No one can claim that this result was unexpected, as we in CARICOM have been sounding alarms for months about the dangers inherent in the imminent rainy season. To survive a catastrophic earthquake, only to be killed by rain, is an unfathomable tragedy. The entirely avoidable deaths of those women and children will remain a stain on the collective conscience of this body and on our membership. Mr. President, talk is cheap, even when it is the heady talk of billions of dollars. Commitments made must be commitments kept, and we must hold to account those who repeatedly make empty promises. St. Vincent and the Grenadines was not included among the we who established this role for the G20 in Pittsburgh. Indeed, we, like 172 other member states, were not admitted to the meeting. We saw no agenda. We read no minutes of the decisions that took place. As dedicated champions of the UN Charter, we also note that Articles 1 and 55 of that document designate the United Nations as the forum for international economic cooperation and solutions. Indeed, our caution towards the G20 can be found in President Obama's very endorsement of it. Permit me again to quote from his statement a few days ago. He said, and I quote, "Because in a world where prosperity is more diffuse, we must broaden our circle of cooperation to include emerging economies, economies from every corner of the globe. We could not agree more. In the wake of the worst financial crisis since the Great Depression, 172 economies should not be locked out of economic discussions, waiting anxiously on the doorstep of the G20 for signals and policy shifts that affect our continued survival. We in the Caribbean have been disproportionately and devastatingly affected by the crisis, which we played no role in creating. Yet we have been forced to rely on friendly nations as interlocutors on our behalf. We remain convinced that the deliberations and past decisions of the G20, from its misunderstanding of the precarious vulnerabilities of small, highly indebted middle-income countries to its draconian outlook on offshore financial services, would have benefited from our perspective. We therefore call on the UN membership to give meaning to the words of our Charter, to re-establish our body as a forum for meaningful solutions and cooperation on economic matters. We must reinvigorate the work of ECOSOC. We must renew the mandate of the ad hoc working group to decisively follow up on issues contained in the outcome of the world financial crisis and its impact on development. Good global governance must therefore be premised on global inclusivity. This, Mr. President, is our fifth point. No corner of the world should be excluded from participation in our global family. St. Vincent and the Grenadines is populated by a proud and noble people with a history of fierce struggle for freedom and independence. There is a steel in the psyche of our Caribbean civilization and its Vincentian component, a steel forged in the fires of slavery and genocide and beaten on the anvil of colonialism, exploitation, and resistance. Our small size belies our indomitable spirit. We possess an independence that undergirds Cuba's heroic resistance to an unjust and internationally condemned blockade. We have a strength that informs the nobility of the Haitian people's response to unimaginable tragedy. We lay claim to a resilience that is etched in our collective history and reverberates in the names of our region's national heroes like Nani, Garvey, Bossa, Marty, and Chatoyer, to name but a few. Our democracies can neither be bought, sold, nor intimidated, and our commitment to the democratic inclusivity of the United Nations and the supremacy of its charter is similarly unshakable. It is against this backdrop, Mr. President, that you will find St. Vincent and the Grenadines to be a strong ally in your efforts to re-establish the central role of this body in matters of global governance. I thank you very much.